Every morning in my house on the hill starts the same way. I wake up a few minutes before the alarm clock rings, put on an old robe, and go to the terrace with a cup of strong coffee. The view of Carpinteria Bay is the only luxury I allow myself to display openly. My name is Crawford Huxley. I'm 68, and I don't trust people, especially those who call themselves my family. Carpinteria is the perfect place for someone like me. Small enough to know your neighbors, but close enough to Santa Barbara that you don't feel cut off from civilization. It's where I spent the last 15 years of my life after I sold my printing company in Los Angeles and retired. Printing had been my life since I was 22, a small business that had grown into a respectable company. I worked 16 hours a day, missed Daisy's school assemblies, and didn't show up for family gatherings, all to secure a future. Daisy, my only daughter, never understood this. To her, I was just an absentee father who valued business over family. Alice, her mother and my ex-wife, left when Daisy was 12. Said she was tired of living with a man who was married to his business. I didn't blame her. Alice deserved a better husband, but I couldn't be any different. The sea is rough today, waves crashing against the shore with a deafening roar. Sounds like a warning. The last call from Daisy was 3 days ago. She wondered if I needed help around the house. In her 36 years of life, it was the first time she'd shown such concern. It made me wary. One thing my daughter inherited from me is practicality. She doesn't just call. If she shows interest, it means she wants something. Usually money. When Daisy was 22, she asked me to pay for her law school tuition. I agreed, but she dropped out the second year, saying it wasn't her calling. Tens of thousands of dollars went down the drain. At 26, she needed money for a down payment on an apartment. At 30, to open a small vintage clothing boutique that went under 6 months later. After that, I said no. Explained that I would no longer finance her whims. We didn't speak for almost a year until she met Ethan Paxton, her current husband. He seemed like an ambitious and smart guy. Worked for a big construction company, talked about plans to start his own business. I even considered helping them with some seed money, but something stopped me. Maybe the way he priced things in my house, or the way he quickly turned the conversation to money. They'd been married 5 years. The wedding was modest. I insisted I'd only pay for a small ceremony. Daisy was disappointed, but Ethan was unexpectedly supportive. "We'll manage on our own," he said with a pride that struck me as playful. After the wedding, our contact became even more infrequent. Christmas cards, the occasional birthday call. I knew they'd bought a house in Santa Barbara, too expensive for their income. Daisy took a job with an insurance company. Ethan continued to work in construction, but their ambitions were clearly exceeding their means. Last year, I suffered a minor heart attack. Nothing serious, but enough to spend a week in the hospital. Daisy visited me once. She brought fruit and magazines, but her gaze wandered around the ward as if assessing how long I had left. As I recovered and returned home, the calls became more frequent. There were questions about my well-being, about how I was coping alone in such a big house. I wasn't naive. In 50 years in business, I had learned to recognize falseness. People rarely do things for nothing, especially when money's involved. And I had it almost $2 million in accounts and investments, not counting the house on the hill. I never told Daisy the exact amount, but she must have guessed. I lived modestly, but the print shop was successful, especially in the last years before I sold it. When you get older, people start to look at you differently, not as a person, but as a safe with a combination you have to pick before time runs out. I've seen it in the eyes of neighbors, realtors, even doctors. "How are you doing, Mr. Huxley? Have you thought about moving to a more compact place?" They all wanted a piece of the pie. My pie that I'd been baking for decades. I was particularly amused by the young real estate agents. They would come in with brightly colored brochures of nursing homes, calling them active retirement communities. I would listen to them, nod, and politely escort them to the door. My home was my fortress, and I had no intention of leaving it. 2 years ago, I began to notice that things in the house were moving around. Not missing, just not where I left them. An old address book with phone numbers, a file of deeds to the house, bank statements. At first, I chalked it up to age and forgetfulness, but then I installed cameras, small, discreet ones in key places in the house, and I waited. On the tape from April 12th of last year, I saw Daisy going through my desk drawers while I was in the garden. Ethan stood guard at the window. I didn't say anything to them. I just started keeping all the important documents in a safe behind the painting in the bedroom. An old trick, but effective. I've been more careful since then. Started a separate credit card linked to a small account. On the main accounts, I set up dual authentication and notifications of any access attempts. My attorney, Bennett Lowry, knew of my suspicions and suggested I draft a new will with clear terms. "It's best to be reassured, Crawford," he said. I agreed. Bennett was one of the few people I trusted. We'd met 40 years ago when he was an aspiring lawyer, and I owned a small print shop on the verge of bankruptcy. He helped me restructure my debts and stay afloat. He has handled all of my cases since then. The second person I trusted was Trudy Ramirez, my housekeeper, who came twice a week. A 62-year-old woman with a stern face and a kind heart. She had worked for me since my first day in Carpinteria. Never asked unnecessary questions, never meddled in my affairs, just did her job perfectly. I paid her above market rate and sometimes gave her expensive Christmas gifts. She was the only one who knew the code to the alarm system and had a key to the house. Yesterday, Daisy called again. Said she and Ethan wanted to stop by for dinner on Friday. "Just to check on you, Dad. It's been so long since we've seen each other." There was a feigned concern in her voice that made me cringe. But I agreed. I wondered what they were up to this time. I finished my coffee and went back inside. The clock read 7 in the morning, time for my usual walk along the beach. I put on my baseball cap and windbreaker, grabbed my cane, which I hardly ever used, but which gave me the right infirm old man look, and went outside. The ocean has always had a calming effect on me. Its constancy and perpetual change reminded me of business. You have to be flexible, but stay the course. I walked along the shore, watching the early surfers, young guys and girls full of energy and hope. I was once like that too, confident that I could conquer the world. In a way, I succeeded, although the price was high. Alice often said I'd traded happiness for success. Maybe she was right. But what is happiness? It's a fleeting feeling that comes and goes. Success can be measured, it can be accumulated, as I've accumulated my assets over the years. It gives you security, independence, freedom of choice. When Alice left, taking 12-year-old Daisy, I was devastated but not surprised. Our marriage had long ago become a coexistence of two strangers. I offered generous alimony and educational expenses for Daisy. Alice agreed, but insisted that I spend at least weekends with my daughter. Those weekends were agonizing for both of us. I didn't know what to talk about with a teenager, and Daisy withdrew into herself. We went to the movies, the zoo, museums, all those places where we could minimize communication. By the time she was 16, she began to refuse to go out, preferring to spend time with friends. I didn't insist. Maybe that was a mistake. Alice remarried when Daisy was 17. Her new husband, a school teacher, seemed like a good man. They moved to San Diego, and my contact with my daughter became even less frequent. The last time I saw Alice was at Daisy's college graduation. She looked happy, peaceful, like life without me was exactly what she needed. On the way back, I stopped by a small cafe on the waterfront. The owner, Neil, greeted me as usual. "Good morning, Mr. Huxley." "The usual." I nodded and sat down at my table by the window. A few minutes later, I had a plate of omelets and fresh orange juice in front of me. Neil knew I appreciated the consistency. "Your daughter stopped by yesterday," he said, wiping down a nearby table, "with her husband. Asked if you come here often." I froze with fork in hand. "And what did you tell them?" "The truth. That you come in every morning at 7:30 and order the same thing." Neil shrugged. "They asked about you. How you look, whether you've had any health complaints." "Interesting," I muttered, setting my fork aside. My appetite was gone. "Your brother-in-law left a nice tip," Neil added with a smile. "Nice guy." I knew that nice guy type. They smile and tip as long as it helps them get what they need. Ethan always gave the impression of someone who was playing a role rather than living his life. Words too right, gestures too precise. In the 5 years I'd known him, I'd never once seen him for real. Even when he got drunk at the rare family reunions, his intoxication seemed calculated. Daisy chose him because he was the exact opposite of me. Attentive, generous with compliments, always willing to listen. At least that's how it seemed at first glance. I suspected that underneath that mask was a man obsessed with money and status as much as I was in my youth, but without my hard work and patience. After paying, I headed home. The day promised to be hot, the sun was already blazing. An elderly couple in an electric golf cart drove by, waving hello. I nodded back. Everyone in Carpinteria knew each other, at least by sight. It gave the illusion of community, though in reality everyone lived in their own little world. My house was visible from afar, a white two-story Mediterranean-style building with a terracotta roof. Not the biggest on the hill, but with the best view. I bought it for cash 15 years ago, right after I sold the print shop. The real estate agent almost passed out when I turned down the mortgage. As I approached the house, I noticed an unfamiliar car in the driveway, a late-model silver BMW. Daisy and Ethan weren't due until Friday, but they always had a problem with punctuality. I took a deep breath, preparing myself for the unplanned visit. The front door was unlocked, a clear sign that I had guests. I stepped into the cool hallway and heard voices from the kitchen. A woman's laughter, a man's whispering. Familiar sounds, but for some reason now they made me uneasy. "Daddy, you're back already." Daisy peeked out of the kitchen with a wide smile. She was wearing a summer dress, her hair gathered into a careless bun. In her hand, a glass of something that looked suspiciously like my collector's whiskey. "We decided to surprise you," she continued, approaching for a hug. She smelled of expensive perfume and alcohol. "Ethan was supposed to pick up his car from a service in Santa Barbara, and we thought, why not stop by your place?" "What a coincidence," I remarked dryly, accepting her hug but not returning it. "I was just thinking about you this morning." Ethan came out of the kitchen with my favorite whiskey glass in his hand. He was wearing expensive jeans and a shirt with the sleeves carelessly rolled up, the image of a successful man with nothing to prove. I knew it was a facade. His watch, which he was so proud of, was a fake. I was a watch connoisseur and could see the difference. "Mr. Huxley, good to see you." He held out his hand for a firm handshake, too firm, as if he was trying to demonstrate strength. I responded with a languid shake. "How are you feeling?" "Daisy tells me you've been taking morning walks. That's wonderful at your age." "At my age," I repeated, not hiding my sarcasm. "I'm 68, Ethan, not 98. Daisy laughed nervously, placing a hand on her husband's shoulder. "Dad was always in good shape. Remember when he beat you at tennis 2 years ago?" Ethan's face tensed slightly. That match was the only time I'd ever seen his real emotion, the anger of a loser. "How to forget? You taught me a lesson then, Mr. Huxley." "Call me Crawford," I said, walking past them into the kitchen. "We've known each other for 5 years. It's about time we switched to first names." On the kitchen table, I noticed bags of groceries from an expensive supermarket in Santa Barbara. Daisy followed my gaze. "We thought we'd make dinner. I remember how much you like steaks. We also bought your favorite wine." "How nice," I smiled, trying not to make the smile look too fake. "And why the sudden concern?" Daisy and Ethan exchanged quick glances, so quick that a normal person might not have noticed. But I'd long ago learned to read body language. "Do we need an excuse to visit you?" Daisy walked over and took me under her arm. "We just missed you and worried after your heart attack." "A minor ailment," I corrected. "We decided we should visit you more often." She ignored my correction. "Besides, there's something we need to discuss with you." There it was, the real reason for the visit. "Nothing serious," Ethan quickly added, noticing my reaction. "Just some advice. You're a financial genius." Flattery never worked with me, but Ethan didn't realize that. I decided to play their game. "Sure, always happy to help, but first I'd like to take a shower after my walk. Make yourself comfortable. You know where everything is." As I climbed the stairs, I could hear them whispering in the kitchen. Scraps of phrases reached me. Too straightforward. "You have to be more careful. How much he might have." In the bedroom, I closed the door and pulled out my phone. A quick text to Bennett. "Daughter and husband arrived early. Starting surgery today." The reply came almost instantly. "Got it. Keep me posted." I showered, changed into my house pants and shirt, and discreetly checked the cameras in the house via an app on my phone. They worked perfectly. Every movement of my guests was being recorded. As I walked down to the living room, I noticed Ethan studying my collection of vintage watches in the glass display case. His fingers were almost touching the glass, his eyes squinting appraisingly. "Impressive, isn't it?" I asked, approaching from behind. He flinched and turned around. "It's an amazing collection. How long have you been collecting?" "Since I was 30 years old. I bought my first watch when the print shop began to bring in a steady income. A Patek Philippe 1972. They cost $3,000 at that time. A huge amount of money for me. It's worth 20 times that now." Ethan's eyes lit up at the mention of the cost. 20 times? Have you ever thought about selling? "Never," I cut him off. "Some things don't sell." Daisy called us to the table. She set it up on the terrace that overlooked the ocean. The setting sun was coloring the sky pink and orange. In another situation, this could have been a lovely family dinner. "Wine?" Daisy picked up a bottle of red. "Just a little." I held out the glass. "The doctors don't recommend I get carried away." "Oh, I forgot about your medication." She slapped herself on the forehead. "Did you take your evening pills?" "Not yet. I usually take them before bed." Ethan laid out the steaks he'd cooked on my old grill. The meat smelled delicious. You had to hand it to him. He could cook. "To family," he raised his glass. "And to your health, Crawford." I took a small sip. The wine was expensive, but not what I usually drank. Too sweet, with a haunting aftertaste. So was the care of my guests. Dinner flowed in a tense atmosphere of forced casualness. Daisy talked about her work at the insurance company, about new clients and a possible promotion. Ethan talked about the projects he was working on, an apartment complex in Montecito and the renovation of a historic building in downtown Santa Barbara. They conjured up the image of a successful couple who didn't need financial help. I listened, nodded, and waited for them to get to the true purpose of the visit. "How are the renovations to your house coming along?" I asked as the conversation began to fade. "You were talking about remodeling the kitchen last time." Daisy and Ethan exchanged glances again. "We've put those plans on hold," Daisy began cautiously. "It's not a good time for major spending." "Problems at work?" I pretended to be concerned. Ethan set aside his fork and knife. "Not exactly problems. More like unexpected complications. The company is going through a restructuring, and some projects are frozen. My team has been cut in half." "It's not the best of times in insurance either," Daisy picked up on that. "Clients are saving on policies, commissions are down." I shook my head sympathetically. "Tough times for everyone." "What's the mortgage situation?" Ethan tensed. "Why do you ask?" "Just wondering. Your house is in a good neighborhood. The payments must be substantial." Daisy lowered her gaze. "To be honest, Dad, we're having trouble making the payments. The mortgage rate has gone up, and our income... Anyway, we're 3 months in arrears." "The bank sent a warning about a possible foreclosure," Ethan added, trying to remain calm. "We have 60 days to pay off the arrears, or foreclosure proceedings on the house will begin." "How much do you need?" I asked the question bluntly, offhandedly. They looked at each other again. Daisy began. "We didn't mean to ask." $42,000, Ethan interrupted her. "That will cover the debt and give us something to hold on to until things stabilize." I leaned back in my chair, pretending to mull over their words. In reality, I already knew about their debts. A friend of mine at the bank where they took out their mortgage had informed me a month ago, making me promise not to reveal the source of the information. Their debt was $37,000, not $42,000. The extra $5,000 apparently was planned for unforeseen expenses, or for a vacation they'd wanted for a long time. "That's a serious amount of money," I finally uttered. "I'm not sure I can spare that much in cash right now." The faces of both of them stretched. Daisy began to speak quickly. "We're not asking for it right now. Maybe in a week or two, we could sign a receipt, set up a repayment schedule." I raised my hand, stopping her. "I didn't say no. I just can't do it in cash. But with a card..." Ethan's eyes lit up. "You have that amount on your card?" I nodded with deliberate nonchalance. "And even more than that, I recently sold some stock, and I was going to reinvest it, but I haven't decided where. The money is still sitting in the account." "How much is there, if it's no secret?" Ethan tried to sound casual, but his voice shook slightly. "About $1,900,000, I said the amount, watching their reactions carefully. Daisy nearly choked on her wine. Ethan stiffened for a moment, then quickly put the mask of equanimity back on his face. Impressive, he pronounced, but we need a much smaller amount. Of course, I smiled. Just explaining why I don't keep that much in cash. Most of the money is in accounts and investments. You've always been very prudent, Dad. Daisy squeezed my hand. We're so grateful you're willing to help. A family should support each other. I said the words as I watched their faces. Not a shadow of shame or embarrassment, just poorly concealed relief and greed. After dinner, we moved to the living room. I deliberately left my wallet on the coffee table, and then, as if realizing it, put it away in a desk drawer. Getting forgetful, I muttered. Always leaving things wherever I can lately. Daisy came over and sat next to me on the couch. Maybe you should hire an assistant, or move to a place where you'll be taken care of. To a nursing home, you mean? I didn't hide my irritation. I'm doing just fine on my own. I have Trudy who comes twice a week. That's enough. That's not what I meant, Daisy snapped back. Just worried about you. After Mom left, you were always on your own. The mention of Alice was a low blow. Daisy knew it was a sore subject. I prefer to live alone, I retorted. Besides, I have the money to provide for a comfortable old age. Unlike a lot of people. Ethan, who'd been perusing my library, turned around. Speaking of money, you mentioned you were going to reinvest the funds. I have an acquaintance at an investment company who might be able to suggest some interesting options. I barely held back a laugh. A classic move to try to gain control of my finances through a trusted advisor. Thanks, but I have my own financial advisor. We've been working together for 20 years. Ethan didn't give up. Sometimes it's good to get a fresh set of eyes. Modern investment strategies have changed a lot. I prefer time-tested methods, I stood up, signaling the topic was closed. By the way, Daisy said you're not staying the night? Yeah, we need to get back to Santa Barbara. Daisy stood up as well. Ethan has an important meeting tomorrow, and I promised to fill in for a coworker in the morning. Too bad, I feigned disappointment. It would have been nice to spend more time with you. We'll definitely come up this weekend, Daisy promised. Maybe even Friday like we originally planned. I walked them to the door, gave Daisy a hug, and shook Ethan's hand. I'll think about your financial difficulties. Give me a few days. Thanks, Dad. Daisy kissed my cheek. Her lips were cold. When they left, I went back into the living room and turned on my phone. 3 missed calls from Bennett. I called back. How's it going? He asked without preamble. Everything's going according to plan. They've taken the bait. 42,000 is what they want. So far. Do you think they'll be back today? No, I was sure. They're too cautious for that. But tomorrow or the day after tomorrow for sure. When they're sure I'm asleep. Are the cameras working? Perfectly. And I've added a new one. Aimed at the desk drawer where my map supposedly lies. Bennett hummed. You really want to catch them red-handed. It's the only way. I stared at Daisy's picture from her college graduation. A happy, hopeful face. When had it all gone wrong? If I just deny them the money, they'll find another way. Probably a more dangerous one for me. Are you sure you want to go that far? This is your daughter, after all. I was silent for a few seconds. I must know the truth, Bennett, however bitter it may be. After talking, I checked the house. All the doors and windows were locked and the alarm was on. Then I went up to the bedroom and pulled an empty sleeping pill bottle from the bedside table. I left it in plain sight with the label facing out. After taking a shower, I got into bed and turned off the light, but I didn't sleep. Instead, I grabbed my tablet and checked the cameras. The house was empty and quiet. Bye. I thought about Daisy, about her childhood, about how she cried when I didn't show up for her school play because I was busy with an emergency order, about how I promised to take her to Disneyland for her 10th birthday, but canceled the trip because of problems with the printing press, about all the little betrayals that got us to this point. Maybe I deserved what was happening now. Maybe it was payback for years of neglect, but that didn't mean I had to let them cheat me. I had always believed in justice, even harsh justice, even painful justice. At 11:30, I heard a sound outside, a quiet, almost indistinguishable one, then another, as if someone was cautiously climbing up onto the porch. I glanced at the tablet screen. The camera by the front door showed 2 figures. Daisy and Ethan had returned. I set the tablet aside, turned off the light, and closed my eyes, pretending to be asleep. The lock clicked quietly downstairs. They'd used the spare key I'd accidentally left in the vase on the porch. The footsteps were careful, almost inaudible. They climbed the stairs, stopping at each step that might creak. I knew those sounds. I'd learned to avoid creaking places myself when I came in late and didn't want to wake Alice. The door to my bedroom was ajar. A strip of light from the hallway fell on the bed. I kept my breathing even, the relaxed posture of a man in deep sleep. Someone, judging by the light footsteps, Daisy, entered the room and approached the bed. I could feel her presence, hear her breathing. She stood so close I could catch the scent of her perfume, the child I had once held in my arms, my flesh and blood. She was watching me now, checking to see if I was really asleep before she stole my money. "He's fast asleep," she whispered, heading back to the door. I saw the empty sleeping pill packaging. "He definitely won't wake up until morning." "Great!" Ethan's voice was barely audible. "Let's go downstairs. The map should be in the desk drawer." They left as quietly as they'd come. I opened my eyes and picked up the clipboard. The screen showed two figures coming down the stairs. I switched to the camera in the living room and saw them walk over to the table. Ethan opened a drawer and pulled out my wallet. Daisy stood guard, looking around nervously. He opened the wallet and took out a credit card, not a regular one, but a special one I had prepared for this occasion. Platinum, with my name embossed on it. Impressive to look at. "Here it is," Ethan whispered in awe. "Do you have any idea what we could do with a credit limit like that?" "Not now." Daisy looked back at the stairs. "Let's get out of here." "Let's check the balance in the car." Ethan put the wallet back in the drawer, but tucked the card into his shirt pocket. They headed for the exit, trying not to make any noise. I leaned back against the pillows, feeling oddly empty. The plan had worked even better than I'd expected. I now had proof of their intentions. The video of the theft, the special card that only activated when I withdrew cash or made a purchase. But instead of satisfaction, I felt only fatigue and sadness. Years of mistrust and suspicion had led to this moment, and I was right. My own daughter was ready to steal from me. The front door closed quietly. I heard the engine of their car start. The headlights illuminated the bedroom window for a moment, then went out. They were driving away without the lights on so as not to attract attention. I picked up my phone and texted Bennett. "They've got the map. The operation has begun." Then I turned off the lights and closed my eyes. Tomorrow would be another day, a day when they'll realize I'm not as easy as they thought. The day they would learn the price of betrayal. I lay in the dark, listening to the ticking of the old clock on the wall. My eyes had gotten used to the lack of light, and I could make out the outline of the furniture in the bedroom. It had been over an hour since Daisy and Ethan had left with my credit card. I thought I could fall asleep, but sleep wouldn't come. The house was quiet, with only the occasional creak of the floorboards reacting to temperature changes. I'd gotten used to those sounds in 15 years. They had become a part of my life, like the view of the ocean and the smell of salt air in the morning. I grabbed my tablet and watched the security footage. Here they are entering the house, sneaking up the stairs. Here's Daisy peeking into my bedroom, checking to see if I'm asleep. And here's Ethan opening a desk drawer and pulling out a map. Their faces, lit by the dim light of the nightlight I'd purposely left on in the living room, looked alien, greedy, impatient. I stopped the recording and set the clipboard aside. What are they doing now? Trying to check the balance? Planning how to spend money they think is theirs? My phone vibrated. A message from the bank. Attempting card authorization. They didn't waste any time. I wonder what they were trying to buy. Plane tickets? Book a hotel? Or were they just checking to see if the card worked? I opened the bank's app. Attempted payment for $100 at a gas station in Santa Barbara. Verification. The transaction was approved. I had purposely set a small limit on the card so they could make a couple small purchases. Enough to make sure the card worked, but not enough to do serious damage. Another notice. Attempted ATM cash withdrawal. $5,000. Rejected for exceeding the daily limit. They hadn't wasted any time. I grinned in the dark. Daisy had always been impatient, even as a child. I remember when she couldn't wait for Christmas and would find hidden presents a week before the holiday. That character trait hadn't changed over the years. Only the objects of desire had gotten more expensive. The phone vibrated again. This time a call from Bennett. "They've started using the card," I said in lieu of a greeting. "I know," Bennett's voice sounded strained. "Got the notifications. They tried to withdraw cash. And check the card at the gas station." "Yeah, next step is a big purchase. I bet they'll try to book tickets or a hotel. Do you think they'll be back tonight?" Bennett was quiet for a moment. "I doubt it. They'll wait until morning to make sure you notice the missing card. They want to see your reaction. Then we should get ready for tomorrow." I sat up on the bed. The sleep was finally gone. "Can you make it in the morning?" "With the paperwork?" "Sure. And with the police?" I hesitated. The police meant an official statement, a public scandal, possibly a trial. This was the final frontier, after which there would be no turning back. "Yes," I finally answered. "With the police. It's time to end this game." After the conversation, I sat in the dark for a long time. Outside the window, I could see the ocean, illuminated by moonlight. Calm, eternal, indifferent to human problems. I thought of all the times I could have done things differently. Spend more time with my daughter, teaching her to value hard work and honesty, not just money and the comfort it brings, to show her that real value is in relationships, not things. But it was too late for such thoughts. Too much water had passed. Daisy had grown up believing that money was the most important thing, that her father should provide for her needs whatever they were, that she was entitled to my fortune simply because she was my daughter. I picked up the clipboard again and opened the folder of photos. Here's Daisy at 5, with her 2 front teeth knocked out, smiling at the camera. Here she is at 12, serious and aloof, standing next to me at a school assembly. I remember that day. It was just after Alice left. Daisy barely spoke to me, blaming me for the destruction of the family. Maybe she was right. Here's a picture of her college graduation. I wasn't at the ceremony. I was in Japan making an important deal for new printing equipment. I sent her an expensive gift and a card. She didn't call to thank me. I closed the folder and set the clipboard aside. Nothing could be changed. We'd both made our choices years ago. A new notification from the bank. Attempted payment on an online travel booking service. $4,800. Rejected for exceeding the limit. They were trying to buy tickets. Where to? Hawaii? Europe? Doesn't matter. What matters is that they weren't going to give me my card back. They planned to use all the money and disappear. I went to the window. On the horizon, I could see the lights of a ship moving slowly along the coast. I wondered where it was going. What kind of cargo is it carrying? Who is at the helm at this late hour? Life is full of unknowns. The only thing I was sure of was human greed. In 50 years in business, I had seen it countless times. Partners cheating each other. Employees stealing from the cash register. Clients refusing to pay for work done. I thought I was prepared for any betrayal. But not this. Not from my own daughter. I went back to bed and closed my eyes. I needed to rest before tomorrow. It was going to be a rough one. I woke up to the sound of an engine. A car was pulling up in front of the house. The clock read 7:30 in the morning, earlier than I had expected. I got up quickly, washed and dressed. I didn't want them to catch me in bed or in my robe. Today I had to look focused and determined. From the bedroom window, I saw Ethan's silver BMW pull up in the driveway. They got out of the car and headed toward the house. Daisy looked nervous, constantly looking around. Ethan, on the other hand, seemed confident and calm. I went down to the living room and sat in a chair, opening the morning paper. I heard the key turn in the lock. They came in, trying not to make any noise. "Dad?" Daisy's voice sounded unnaturally cheerful. "Are you up already?" I put the paper aside and looked at them. "Good morning. Didn't expect you so early." "We thought we'd stop by before work." Daisy came over and kissed my cheek. She smelled like the same perfume she smelled yesterday. Hadn't she changed her clothes? Hadn't slept in. "How are you feeling?" "Fine." I looked at them carefully. "And how are you?" "You look tired." Ethan gave me a strained smile. "Went to bed late. Discussed your offer to help with the mortgage." "Yeah?" I pretended to be interested. "And what decision did you come to?" They exchanged a look. Daisy began. "We're very grateful for your offer, Daddy. It's so generous of you. But we've decided to manage on our own." Ethan interrupted her. "It's a matter of principle. We have to work out our own problems." I could barely contain my laughter. What nobility! To give up money they'd already stolen, or tried to steal. Commendable, I nodded. Self-reliance is an important quality, though sometimes accepting help is necessary too. We just came by to say thanks for dinner last night. Daisy rubbed the strap of her purse nervously. And to apologize that we won't be able to come over on Friday like we planned. Ethan had an opportunity to go to a conference in San Diego, and we decided to combine it with a little vacation. A conference? I raised my eyebrows. What interesting news. And when are you leaving? Tonight, Ethan answered quickly. A sudden offer, but very beneficial to your career. I see, I nodded. Well, I wish you a good time. San Diego's a beautiful city. There was an awkward pause. They were clearly expecting me to mention the missing map, ask if they'd seen it, to start panicking about the lost money. But I remained silent, looking at them calmly. Daisy couldn't take it anymore. Daddy, you seem strange today. Is everything okay? Absolutely, I smiled. Just thinking about how quickly things change. Yesterday you were talking about mortgage problems, and today you're planning a vacation. Ethan's face tensed slightly. The conference is paid for by the company, and we booked the hotel on a special offer. Very economical. Of course, I nodded. Saving money's a good thing. By the way, would you like some coffee? I was just about to make some. No thanks, Daisy glanced at her watch. We should get going. Lots to do before we leave. I understand, I stood up. Then I won't keep you. We headed for the door. I could feel their tension. They were expecting a catch, a question about the map, any sign that I'd noticed I was missing. But I remained silent. I'll see you when you get back, I hugged Daisy. She tensed in my arms. Bring the pictures. I will, she smiled strained. Bye, Dad. I shook Ethan's hand. His palm was damp with sweat. Good luck at the conference. Thanks, he nodded, avoiding my gaze. They were almost to the car when a black sedan pulled into the driveway. Behind it was a police car with flashers but no siren. Daisy froze. Ethan grabbed her arm as if preparing to run. Bennett emerged from the sedan with a leather briefcase in his hands. From the police car were two officers. One young, wary, the other older, with the tired look of a man who had seen everything. Mr. Huxley, Bennett nodded at me. I got your message and came as arranged. Thank you, Bennett. I turned to my daughter and son-in-law. Their faces were white with shock. Daisy, Ethan, you're not in a hurry to go anywhere, are you? We have a conversation to have. What's going on? Daisy's voice shook. Why are the police here? Let's go back inside, I pointed to the door. It'll be more convenient to explain there. Ethan took a step back. I don't understand what's going on, but we don't have time. We need to go. The senior officer stepped closer. Sir, we've received a report of a theft. I would encourage you to cooperate. Theft? Daisy looked at me with feigned surprise. Dad, what's going on? Did something get stolen from you? I looked at her, my only daughter, my flesh and blood. The woman who had sneaked into my house last night, checked to see if I was asleep, and taken what she thought was the key to wealth, who planned to disappear with my money, who was now standing in front of me and lying, looking me in the eye. Yes, Daisy, I said calmly but firmly. My credit card was stolen, the same one you tried to pay for the tickets with last night. Ethan jerked as if from a blow. Daisy opened her mouth but didn't utter a word. I don't know what you mean, Ethan finally squeezed out. We didn't take any map. Bennett opened his briefcase and pulled out a folder. We have security footage, Mr. Paxton, and records of attempted transactions. You tried to withdraw $5,000 in cash and book a trip worth almost $5,000? To Hawaii, if I'm not mistaken? This is some kind of mistake, Daisy finally found her voice. Her eyes filled with tears. Daddy, you don't think we... I don't think that, Daisy, I interrupted her. I know we are. I was awake when you came back last night. I heard you talking in the living room about how you're going to fly off to Hawaii and then buy a fancy house. Ethan's face contorted with anger and fear. He instinctively reached for his shirt pocket where the map lay. You don't have to, I shook my head. You have the map. But it's useless. I blocked it this morning. Mr. and Mrs. Paxton, the older officer spoke. You'll have to come with us to the station to testify. You have the right to remain silent, Anything you say can and will be used against you in court. You have the right to an attorney." "This is a misunderstanding," Daisy exclaimed, now openly crying. "Daddy, tell them!" "We just wanted to borrow the card. We'd get the money back." I stared at her, feeling a strange emptiness inside. Where was that little girl I was teaching me how to ride a bike? Who used to bring me drawings from kindergarten? Who fell asleep in my arms during long car rides? She was gone. Standing in front of me was a grown woman who had made her choice, who had decided that my money was worth more than our relationship, who was willing to betray me for material possessions. To borrow almost $2 million? My voice sounded tired. "And when were you planning on paying them back? After you bought a luxury home?" Ethan suddenly stepped forward, his face contorted with rage. "You deserve it. All your whole life, all you've done is hoard money. Never helped Daisy when she really needed support. Lived in that huge house all by yourself while we struggled with debt." The junior officer tensed, ready to intervene, but I held up my hand, stopping him. "And that justifies stealing?" I asked calmly. "The fact that I have the money and you don't gives you the right to take it?" "You're my father," shouted Daisy through her tears. "Aren't you supposed to help me? Take care of me?" "You're 36 years old, Daisy." I shook my head. "You're a grown woman. You have a job, a husband, a home. I've helped you many times, paid for your education, given you money for a down payment on an apartment, invested in your business. But every time, you wanted more, and you were never grateful for what you got. Because it was crumbs." Her voice trailed off into a scream. "Crumbs from your fortune. You could have given us so much more, but you preferred to hoard money you didn't even need. Why do you need so much at your age?" I looked at her sadly. She really didn't understand. Didn't see the difference between helping and demanding, between being generous and being a debtor. "It's not about the money, Daisy," I said quietly but firmly. "It's about how you chose to get it. You could have asked for it. We could have discussed it. Instead, you snuck into my house at night and stole my card. You betrayed my trust." "What trust?" Minus Ethan laughed bitterly. "You never trusted us. You installed cameras in your own home. Who does that?" "A man who knows the price of betrayal," I replied. "And as you can see, for good reason." Bennett came up to me. "The officers are ready to take them to the station. You'll need to come back later to formalize your statement." I nodded. Daisy looked at me with desperation and anger. "You can't do this to us," her voice shook. "We're your family." "Family doesn't steal from each other, Daisy." I turned away, feeling something finally torn between us. "Family doesn't plan to run away with stolen money." The officers approached them. "Please make your way to the car." Ethan straightened, trying to maintain his dignity. "This is a mistake. We didn't steal anything." "The map in your pocket says otherwise," the older officer pointed out. "Let's go through." They headed toward the police car. Daisy turned around at the last moment. Her face was contorted with anger and despair. "You're going to regret this," she shouted. "You're going to be alone." "All alone?" I didn't answer. I watched the officers usher them into the car. The door slammed shut. The car slowly pulled out onto the road. My daughter and son-in-law, arrested for trying to steal from me. This was an ending I couldn't have imagined even in the bleakest of scenarios. Bennett puts a hand on my shoulder. "Are you okay?" "No," I shook my head. "But I will be." "Let's go inside. We have a lot to talk about." We walked into the living room where we had all sat together as recently as last night, discussing their financial problems, where I had deliberately mentioned the large sum on the card, where I'd set a trap for my own daughter. Bennett spread the papers out on the table. "Here are the videos, printouts of attempted transactions, the police report. It's all ready, just needs your signature." I took the pen, hesitated a second, then resolutely signed the papers. What started out as a test had turned into something much more serious, into a point of no return. "What now?" I asked, setting the pen aside. "Now they'll testify." Bennett gathered up the papers. "Probably try to cut a deal with the investigation. Either way, they're in serious trouble. Attempted grand larceny is no joke." I nodded, looking out the window at the ocean. The waves lapped against the shore, just as they had millions of years before. The world continued on its course, despite the human dramas. "They didn't expect me to catch them," I said thoughtfully. "Thought the old man wouldn't notice the missing card." or wouldn't be able to track the transactions. They underestimated you. Bennett poured us both a whiskey, even though it was still morning. Always underestimated. I took the glass but didn't drink. Instead, I stared at the amber liquid, swirling it slowly in a circle. You know what the saddest part is? I asked, not expecting an answer. I would have helped them. If they just asked, explained the situation, I would have given them money to pay off the mortgage. But they chose to steal. Bennett was silent. He knew me well enough to know I didn't need words of comfort or advice right now. Just the presence of a friend who didn't judge or make excuses. I finally took a sip of whiskey. The bitterness of the drink matched the bitterness of the moment. My own daughter chose to become a thief rather than ask for help. She chose deceit over trust. And now we're all going to pay for it. The Carpinteria police station smelled of coffee and paper. The small one-story building with 3 offices and an interrogation room wasn't designed for serious crime. It was rare for anything more serious than petty theft and parking violations to happen in our town. Today was different. I sat in a hard plastic chair in the hallway, waiting for the officers to finish their preliminary interview with Daisy and Ethan. Bennett stood at the window, reviewing paperwork and occasionally answering phone calls. His confidence and professionalism had a calming effect, but a storm raged inside me. Carpinteria's police chief, Roger Newman, stepped out of the interview room and headed toward me. I'd known him for almost 10 years. We sometimes played golf at the local club. A tall man with a military bearing and graying temples, he always looked like he was on duty, even in his spare time. Crawford, he nodded at me. Nasty situation. Yeah, I stood up, feeling my knees aching after an hour of sitting in the uncomfortable chair. Did they say anything? The versions differ. Roger pursed his lips. Your son-in-law claims you gave them the card voluntarily. Your daughter says they only wanted to borrow the money for a while to work out the problems with the mortgage. I chuckled bitterly. And that's why they tried to buy tickets to Hawaii and withdraw $5,000 in cash? That's what's bringing them down, Roger nodded. The transaction records don't match their explanations. Plus, the video footage from your house clearly shows that they entered at night without your knowledge and took the card while you were supposedly asleep. Bennett walked over to us. Are they insisting on a lawyer? Not yet, Roger shook his head. Looks like they're counting on a family settlement. Mr. Paxton has repeated several times that this is a misunderstanding that can be resolved without lawyers. Typical. I didn't hide my irritation. He's always trying to get away with it. Bennett put a hand on my shoulder. Crawford, are you sure you want to keep going? We can stop now. Withdraw the application, write it off as a family conflict. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to do this. Forget the whole thing like a bad dream, go home, pretend it never happened. But the other part, the part that had spent decades building the business and wouldn't forgive the betrayal, demanded justice. No, I finally answered. I want them to realize what they've done. I want to hear the truth from them themselves. Roger nodded. In that case, I suggest an informal meeting. You, your daughter and son-in-law, in the presence of me and your attorney. No recording, no formal minutes. Just a conversation. Agreed, I glanced at Bennett. He nodded. I'll get the room ready. Roger headed back toward the offices. 10 minutes later, we were ushered into a small room with a rectangular table and 5 chairs. The window overlooked the parking lot behind the station, where there were only 3 cars. The patrol car, my sedan, and Bennett's car. Ethan's BMW must have stayed at my house. Daisy was the first to be ushered into the room. She looked pale and haggard, her makeup smeared with tears. When she saw me, she froze, as if she didn't know how to react. Then she sat silently across from me, not looking up. Ethan appeared next. Unlike his wife, he held himself with contrived confidence, though I could see a muscle twitch in his cheek, a sure sign of nervousness. He sat down next to Daisy and put his hand on her shoulder in a protective gesture. Roger took a seat at the head of the table, and Bennett sat next to me. Everyone was silent for a few moments, as if no one wanted to start this heavy conversation. So, Roger finally said, we are gathered here to clear the air without formal procedure. Mr. Huxley, since the application has been submitted by you, I suggest we begin. I looked at Daisy and Ethan. My daughter and her husband, people who had betrayed my trust, who were willing to steal my money and disappear. Anger, resentment, and frustration overwhelmed me, but I forced myself to speak calmly. I know you took my credit card without authorization, I began. I know you were trying to withdraw cash and buy tickets to Hawaii. I know you planned to disappear with my money. What I want to understand is why. Why did you decide to steal instead of just asking for help? Daisy raised her eyes full of tears. We asked for it. How many times have we talked about our mortgage problems, our financial difficulties? You've always dismissed it with generalities about living within your means. And that justifies stealing? I tried to remain calm, but I could feel my shoulders tensing. It's not stealing, Ethan pitched forward. We took the card, yes, but we were going to pay it back. It was a loan, nothing more. A loan of almost $2 million? I couldn't hold back the sarcasm. And when were you planning on paying it back? After you spent the money on Hawaii and a luxury home? Ethan's face paled slightly. You heard our conversation. Every word, I nodded. I was awake when you came back that night. I heard you discussing what you were going to do with my money. How you'd fly to Hawaii, buy a house, a new car. Not a word about paying me back, Ethan. Not one word. Daisy lowered her gaze. Her shoulders slumped. Ethan tried to keep his composure, but I could see the confidence leaving him. It was an emotional discussion. He tried to make an excuse. We were excited about the possibility of solving our problems. Of course, we planned to get our money back. Liar, I said the word quietly, but it sounded like a punch. You're both lying, and that's even worse than the theft itself. Roger coughed. Mr. Huxley, do you have any proof of your assertions? Bennett pulled a clipboard from his briefcase and turned on the recording. The room was filled with the muffled voices of Daisy and Ethan. 2 million. Can you imagine? We could start a new life. First Hawaii, until everything settles down. Then we could buy the house we've always dreamed of. It's old, I don't think it'll last much longer. You'll inherit the money anyway. I watched their faces as the tape played. Daisy covered her mouth with her hand, her eyes widening in horror. Ethan froze like a deer caught in the headlights. Bennett turned off the tape. A heavy silence ensued. Now you see, I turned to Roger. This wasn't a spontaneous act or a loan. This was a planned theft. Daddy, Daisy's voice shook. It's not what you think. What am I supposed to think, Daisy? I felt years of held-back bitterness break through. That my daughter, whom I've cared for all her life, was willing to steal my money and disappear. That she discussed my possible imminent death as a convenient factor in her plans. You never cared for us, Daisy suddenly shrieked, her face contorted with rage. All my life, you've been interested only in money and business. You missed all the important moments. School concerts, graduations, my first day of college. There was always some important meeting, an urgent order, a business trip. Her words hit me harder than I expected, because there was some truth in them. I was working to provide you with a better life, I objected, but my voice sounded unsure. A better life? Daisy laughed bitterly. Without a father? Without family dinners? Without holidays together? Without support when you really need it? You didn't even show up to my wedding on time. You were an hour late because there was an important conference. I flew in from Tokyo, I felt anger rising inside. I traveled halfway across the world to be at your wedding, which you didn't even want to pay for, she parried. My friend Emily got a dream wedding from her father, and you gave us a minimal budget and said we had to be practical. Ethan put his hand on Daisy's shoulder, trying to reassure her, but she shook off his touch. No, let him hear. Her voice broke into a shout. All your life you've been saving money, denying us proper support. You didn't even want to help with the down payment on the house until Mom stepped in. And now you're sitting alone in a huge house overlooking the ocean, millions in bills, and you accuse us of being greedy? Roger coughed. Mrs. Paxton, let's keep order. No. She wasn't listening. Years of suppressed resentment burst forth. You never loved me, Papa. I was just a tool for you, a way for you to demonstrate your success. My daughter goes to a prestigious college. My daughter works for a big company. You bragged about me to your partners, but you were never interested in what I wanted for myself. I stared at her, amazed at the force of her anger. Was this really how she had seen our relationship all these years? Like a cold calculation on my part? That's not true, Daisy. I tried to speak softer. I've always loved you, always wanted the best for you. The best by your standards, she persisted. You wanted me to become a lawyer even though I hated law. You criticized my choice of husband, my job, my house, everything that didn't fit your idea of success. Ethan, seeing that the situation was spiraling out of control, finally intervened. Daisy, calm down. This isn't going to help our position. What position? She turned to him. The prison? You think he won't send us there? Do you think he'll show mercy? He's been ruthless all his life. I felt something break inside. My daughter thought I was a monster, a man without a heart, thinking only of money and success. I gave you everything I could, I said quietly but firmly. Education, support, opportunities. I worked 16 hours a day so you would never know what need was. About my future or your legacy? Daisy looked at me challengingly. You wanted me to carry on your legacy, to become as successful and cool as you. But I'm different. I just wanted to be happy, to have a normal family, to feel loved. And that's why you decided to steal my money? I got back to the heart of the problem. Because you didn't feel loved enough? Daisy lowered her gaze. You don't understand. Then explain it to me. I leaned forward. Explain why stealing was the only way out. Ethan coughed. Mr. Huxley, we were in a desperate situation. The bank was threatening to foreclose on the house, and we had credit card debt. But decided it was easier to steal. I finished for him. And not just a small amount to pay off the mortgage. You wanted to take everything. It was my idea, Daisy said suddenly, raising her eyes. Don't blame Ethan. I offered to take the card. I thought you wouldn't even notice, that the money didn't mean anything to you, that you were living alone anyway, spending the bare minimum. It's not about the money, Daisy, I shook my head. It's about trust. It's about respect. The fact that you were willing to betray me. Didn't you betray us? She asked quietly. Didn't you betray Mom when you chose work over family? Didn't you betray me when you missed my graduation because you were in Japan on business? Her words hit the mark. I could feel old wounds opening up. That's different, I objected, but sounded unconvinced. For you, it is. Daisy grinned bitterly. You've always justified yourself with a higher purpose, and Mom and I just wanted you around. Bennett, who had been silent for most of the conversation, finally intervened. If I may, I'd like to clarify one detail. Crawford, tell them about the map. I nodded, realizing what he was getting at. The map you took was a trap. I left it in an accessible place on purpose, knowing your financial problems and suspecting you might be tempted. Ethan looked up sharply. What? I noticed the way you looked around the house during your visits, how interested you were in my finances. Saw the security footage of you going through my papers when you thought I was in the garden. I spoke calmly, but inside everything was boiling. I created a special account with limited access and linked a new card to it. There was only $10,000 in the account, but the bank system listed almost $2 million. It was a decoy. Ethan's face went pale. Daisy looked shocked. You set us up on purpose? Her voice trembled. Created a trap for your own daughter? I wanted to know the truth. I met her gaze. Wanted to make sure my suspicions were unfounded. I hoped I was wrong. But you weren't wrong, Ethan said bitterly. We got caught like idiots. You got caught because you decided to steal, I corrected. If you just asked for help, none of this would have happened. Daisy suddenly laughed, a dry, mirthless laugh. We did ask for it. How many times I hinted at our problems. But you've always responded with lectures about financial responsibility. Because it's really important, I was beginning to lose patience. You bought a house you couldn't afford. Took out loans for expensive things, vacations, cars. How are you? Daisy looked at me challengingly. Sitting on millions, living alone in a huge house, and denying your own daughter help? I didn't deny you help, I raised my voice. I paid for your education, gave you money for the down payment on your apartment, invested in your boutique. But not enough, she almost shouted too. Never enough. You've always given exactly enough to appear generous, but you've never fully solved the problem. Roger stood up, calling for order. Please, let's keep calm. Emotions won't help solve the problem. I took a deep breath, trying to calm down. Daisy, I gave you as much as I thought was reasonable. Not to control you, but to teach you independence. Hypocrite, she said quietly. You talk about independence, but you yourself received startup capital from your father. My grandmother told me before she died, $10,000 in the 70s was a lot of money. I froze. That was a low blow. Yes, my father had given me the money to start a print shop, but I paid it back with interest after 3 years. That's different, I finally uttered. I paid that money back. I worked day and night to make the business a success. And we didn't? Ethan finally interjected. You think we're not working? We don't try, but the system is rigged against people like us. What was affordable for your generation is a pipe dream for us without the help of our parents. I looked at him more closely. Maybe there was some truth in what he said. The world had changed. That doesn't justify stealing. I still stood my ground. You could have come to me, explained the situation honestly. Instead, you chose to go behind my back. Because we knew you'd say no, Daisy exclaimed. You always refused when the amount was considerable. And you were right. I didn't give up. Look what your irresponsibility has led to. To debt, to the risk of losing your house, to attempted theft. Roger intervened again, seeing that the conversation was going in circles. I think we should take a break. Everyone needs to calm down and think about next steps. I nodded, feeling suddenly tired. The emotional strain of the last few hours had drained me. Bennett looked worried too. Crawford, he leaned toward me. You have to decide if you want to pursue formal charges. If so, they face serious punishment. If not, we can find another way to resolve the conflict. I looked at Daisy. Despite all the anger and frustration, she was still my daughter, the only person linking me to the future. Did I want to see her in prison? Ruin her life for good? I need to think, I said, rising. Let's take a break. Roger nodded and called for an officer to take Daisy and Ethan back to the waiting room. Before walking out, Daisy turned around. You know what the saddest part is, Dad? Her voice sounded tired. I've always wanted your approval, your love, and all I got was appraisal, criticism, and conditional support. Maybe if you had just held me once and told me you loved me for who I am, things would have turned out differently. After the break, I made a decision, not one that might have eased my conscience, but one that I thought was right. I'd always lived by the principle that everyone should be responsible for their own actions, and I wasn't about to deviate from it now, even if it meant my own daughter. Roger was waiting for me in his office, a small room with faded diplomas on the walls and an old oak desk littered with papers. Bennett sat beside him, looking through the papers. I've decided to proceed with the formal prosecution, I said, sitting down across from Roger. They need to realize the seriousness of their actions. Roger nodded, showing neither approval nor disapproval. I respect your decision, Crawford, but I must warn you that it will lead to a full-fledged criminal case. Attempted grand larceny is a serious charge. They're looking at real jail time. I understand. Bennett put a hand on my shoulder. Are you sure? This is your daughter, Crawford. As disappointed as you are, think about the consequences. I looked at my longtime friend and lawyer. I've been thinking about this all break. If I back out now, what lesson will they learn? That it's okay to try to steal, and if you get caught, you can always get away with a family fight? They're adults. They've made their choices. Roger nodded and slid the official application form toward me. I filled it out slowly, describing the events of the last few days with the precision of an accountant, without emotion or personal judgment. When I signed it, I felt strangely relieved, as if I had crossed the point of no return. What happens next? I asked, handing over the completed application. They'll be officially detained, Roger replied. Bail will be set at a hearing tomorrow. Given the nature of the charges and the evidence, the bail will be substantial. If they can't post it, they'll remain in custody until trial. I nodded. Can I see them before I go? Roger looked at his watch. They're having a conversation with the public defender right now, but they'll be free in 15 minutes. I'll arrange a short meeting. I waited in the same room where we'd spoken earlier. A cup of cold coffee stood in front of me, but I didn't touch it. Memories flashed through my mind. Daisy at 5 on the beach, building sandcastles. Daisy at 12, crying over her mother leaving. Daisy at 18, receiving her diploma, glancing furtively around the room for me, late for the ceremony because of an emergency order. Perhaps I really was a bad father. Perhaps I worked too hard and loved too little. But did that justify what she did? Did my guilt to her give her the right to steal? The door opened and the officer ushered Daisy and Ethan in. They looked broken, pale with eyes red from crying, Daisy, and with the stamp of defeat on their faces, Ethan. They sat down across from me without looking up. "I've filed a formal application," I said without preamble. "There will be a hearing tomorrow to determine the amount of bail." Daisy flinched but showed no surprise. Apparently she'd already expected it after our last conversation. Ethan clenched his fists, his knuckles turning white. "I hope you realize what you're doing," he finally said, raising his eyes. "You're ruining our lives." "No, Ethan," I shook my head. "You ruined your own life when you decided to steal my money." "It was a mistake." Daisy's voice was quiet, almost a whisper. "We panicked over the debt. Didn't think clearly." "Panicked?" I couldn't hold back a bitter chuckle. "You call panicking a carefully planned theft? You broke into my house at night, checked to see if I was asleep, took my card and immediately tried to withdraw cash and buy tickets. That's not panic, Daisy. It's a calculation." "We would have gotten our money back," Ethan raised his voice. "I swear we planned to return them as soon as we got back on our feet." "Stop lying," I rubbed my eyes tiredly. "Your conversation is recorded. You talked about me being old and won't live long, and that you'll inherit the money anyway. Not a word about repayment." Daisy lowered her head even lower. Ethan opened his mouth to object, but then closed it, realizing the futility of further lies. "What's going to happen to our house, Daisy asked after a pause. "With our jobs? What will we tell our friends?" "You should have thought of that before," I replied. "But if you want my opinion, you'd better sell the house before the bank starts foreclosure proceedings. As for a job, depends on your employers. A lot of companies don't keep employees with criminal records." "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" There was bitterness in Ethan's voice. "You see us suffer and you revel in your revenge." I looked him straight in the eye. "No, Ethan, I'm not enjoying it. I'm disappointed and devastated. But I've always believed in taking responsibility for my actions. Now it's time for you to carry yours." The officer opened the door, signaling that the time for our meeting was up. I stood up, feeling suddenly 10 years older. "Daddy," Daisy finally raised her eyes full of tears. "Please don't do this. We can fix this. Go back. Start over." I looked at her, my only daughter, a part of myself, and felt only weariness and frustration. "There's no going back, Daisy," I shook my head. "Some bridges, once burned, cannot be rebuilt." I left the room without looking back, though I heard Daisy call out to me once more. Bennett was waiting in the hallway, his face expressing sympathy and understanding. "Home?" he asked, handing me my coat. "Yes," I nodded. "Home." The next days passed like a blur. I mechanically performed the usual actions. I got up, ate breakfast, went for walks along the beach, read books. But inside I felt empty, as if something vital had been taken out of me. The bail hearing was held the next day. I wasn't present, but Bennett reported the results. Bail was set at $50,000 each. Neither Daisy nor Ethan had that kind of money. They remained in custody. 2 days later, the news spread through Carpinteria. Small town, everybody knows everybody. I noticed a change in the behavior of my neighbors and acquaintances. Some avoided me. Others, on the contrary, expressed exaggerated sympathy. At the waterfront cafe where I had breakfast every morning, customers were silent when I entered and began whispering when I left. Trudy, my housekeeper, hearing the news, came in on Thursday instead of the usual Friday. She didn't ask any questions, just worked with double the care, and before she left a freshly baked apple pie on the kitchen table, her way of showing support. Neil, the owner of the cafe, was one of the few people who spoke to me as usual. "Tough times, Mr. Huxley," he said, pouring me a coffee, "but you're a tough nut to crack. You'll get through this." I appreciated his candor. Most people either pretended not to know or expressed sympathy as if I'd been diagnosed with a terminal illness. The 5th day after Daisy and Ethan's arrest, Alice, my ex-wife and Daisy's mother, rang the doorbell. I hadn't seen her in almost 3 years, since her second husband died of a heart attack. She hadn't changed much. Still the same shrewd brown eyes, the same determined facial lines, only more gray in her once full brown hair. "Crawford," she nodded when I opened the door. "We need to talk." I invited her into the living room, offering her tea. She declined the drinks, sat down in the chair across from me, and got straight to the point, a trait I'd always appreciated in her. "I saw Daisy yesterday," she began. "She's in a terrible state." They both are. "I'm sorry," I replied neutrally. "Sorry?" Alice shook her head. "You sent your own daughter to prison, Crawford." "Our daughter. She made her own choice." "Yes, she made a mistake." Alice leaned forward. "A serious mistake. But couldn't this have been resolved within the family? Why did it have to come to a criminal case?" I looked at my ex-wife, trying to explain to her what seemed obvious to me. "It wasn't an accidental mistake, Alice. They were planning to steal almost $2 million. They talked about how I was going to die soon, and the money would still go to them. They were going to disappear with my money, leaving me with nothing." Alice was quiet for a moment, digesting the information. "I didn't know all the details," she finally uttered. "All Daisy said was that you had a fight over the money, and you called the police." "I'm not surprised," I grinned bitterly. She always knew how to present herself in a favorable light. "Don't be unfair," Alice frowned. "She made a mistake, but she's still your daughter." "Our daughter? Who was willing to steal from me and run away?" "People make mistakes, Crawford," she softened her tone, "especially when they're desperate for money. You've never been a generous father." I gave her everything I could. I felt a familiar irritation rising. The same argument I'd had 20 years ago. The education, the down payment on the apartment, the money for her boutique. I've always supported her. "Materially, yes," Alice nodded. "But always with conditions, always with control. You've never made her feel unconditionally loved and supported." I stood up and walked over to the window, looking out at the ocean. Always the same argument. Always the same accusation of lack of emotional connection, of being cold, of being overly controlling. "I loved her the best I knew how," I finally uttered. "Maybe that wasn't enough, but that doesn't justify stealing." Alice stood up too. "I'm not asking you to justify her. I'm asking you to help her. Withdraw the plea, let this be resolved without trial and jail. She's already been punished. By humiliation, by arrest, by public scandal. Isn't that enough?" I turned to my ex-wife. "What happens then, Alice? Will they continue to live the way they're used to, spending more than they earn, going into debt, and then expecting someone to save them? When will it end?" "I don't know," she shook her head, "but I do know that prison won't make them better. It will only harden them and destroy them completely." I wondered. Maybe she was right. Maybe an official charge was too harsh a punishment. But something inside resisted the idea of just letting them go without consequences. "I'll think about it," I finally said. "I'm not promising anything, but I'll think about it." Alice nodded, realizing that was the most I could do right now. "Thank you, Crawford. Also, Daisy wanted me to tell you that she's sorry. Really sorry." After Alice left, I sat in my chair for a long time, mulling over our conversation. Had she been right? Should I have given Daisy and Ethan another chance? Or would that just be a show of weakness that they would take as permission to continue their irresponsible behavior? That evening, I called Bennett and asked him to come over the next day. We needed to discuss not only the criminal case, but other legal matters as well. He arrived at exactly 10 in the morning, punctual as always. We sat down in my office, a small room on the second floor overlooking the ocean, where I kept important documents and sometimes worked on personal projects. "Alice came by yesterday," I said, pouring us both coffee. "Asked me to withdraw my application." Bennett nodded, showing no surprise. "And what have you decided?" "I'm still thinking," I admitted. "Part of me wants to give them a lesson they'll never forget. The other part doesn't want to see my daughter in prison." "I understand," Bennett sipped his coffee. "You have options. You can withdraw the plea entirely. You can reduce the charge to a lesser charge of theft, which carries no jail time. You can negotiate probation and restitution." I nodded, mulling over the options. "What's your advice as a lawyer?" As a lawyer, to reduce the charges and seek restitution. It will teach them a lesson, but it won't ruin their lives completely. And as a friend? Bennett hesitated. As a friend, I think forgiveness sometimes takes more force than punishment, but it has to be a conscious forgiveness, not just weakness. I nodded, his words mirroring my own thoughts. There is something else I want to discuss. My will. Bennett set the cup on the table. Do you want to make changes? Yes. I pulled a folder of documents from my desk drawer. I want to disinherit Daisy completely. Bennett didn't look surprised, but his eyes expressed concern. Are you sure? It's a big step. I'm sure, I nodded. After everything that's happened, I can't trust her with my fortune. She's proven she's not ready to handle that kind of money responsibly. And who do you plan to leave your estate to? I pulled the draft of the new will I'd made last night out of the folder. 20% to you as my friend and trustee, 30% to a small business fund in Carpinteria, another 30 to scholarships for students in the printing department at the university where I studied. The remaining 20 to Trudy, my housekeeper. She earned it with her devotion. Bennett looked over the document, his eyebrows rising at the sight of the amount I planned to leave him. Crawford, that's too generous. You deserve it, I stopped him with a gesture. You've been there for me all these years, supporting me in both business and personal matters. You're one of the few people I truly trust. Bennett nodded, touched by my words. Thank you. I'll have the official document ready by tomorrow. There's one more thing. I pulled a second document from the folder. I want to set up a trust fund for Daisy's future children, should they come along. The money will only be available for their education, and only when they turn 18. Daisy and Ethan will not have access to these funds. Bennett studied the document and nodded. A sensible decision. You're not completely disowning the family after all. From family, no, I shook my head, but Daisy has proven herself not worthy of my trust. I don't want her children paying for their parents' mistakes. We discussed the details of the new will and trust fund. Bennett promised to have all the documents ready by the next day so I could sign them. Then the conversation turned back to the criminal case. So what have you decided? He asked. Do you withdraw the statement or do we continue? I was silent for a long time, weighing the pros and cons. Finally, I made a decision. Offer them a deal. They plead guilty to attempted theft, reimburse the cost of the card and attorney fees, do community service, and get probation. In return, I'll reduce the charge to theft in a lesser amount. A reasonable compromise, Bennett nodded. I'll contact their attorney later today. After Bennett left, I went out on the terrace and took a long look at the ocean. Did I feel satisfied with the decisions I'd made? Not really. More like fatigue and sadness. I was depriving my only daughter of an inheritance I'd saved up for a lifetime. I was putting her through the humiliation of a public confession. But at the same time, I was giving her a chance to avoid prison. A fresh start. Was I right? I didn't know. Maybe Alice was right, and I had always been too strict, too demanding, too stingy with emotional support. Maybe I was partly to blame for the way Daisy had grown up, accustomed to receiving material goods without understanding their true value. But it was too late for self-accusations now. I had made a choice, not a perfect one, not the most merciful one, but one that I thought was fair, and it was a choice I had to live with. That evening, Bennett called. Their lawyer has agreed to discuss a deal. The meeting is tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock at the courthouse. Okay, I nodded, though he couldn't see it. I'll be there. Crawford, Bennett's voice sounded unusually soft. Are you sure you want to disinherit Daisy completely? It's definitive. Perhaps in time your relationship will change. I'm sure, I replied firmly. Some things can't be undone, Bennett. Some betrayals are too deep. After the conversation, I went up to the bedroom, opened the drawer of my bedside table, and pulled out an old photograph. Daisy at age 7, sitting on my shoulders during a rare family trip to an amusement park. We're both smiling, me with pride, her with boundless joy. When did it all go wrong? When did we lose that connection, that simple joy in each other's presence? I stare at the photograph for a long time, then carefully put it back in the drawer. You can't get the past back. One can only move forward, bearing the burden of one's decisions and their consequences. It had been 3 months since the day Daisy, Ethan, and I stood in the courtroom, and listened to the judge's decision. They had accepted the deal. Bennett had offered a guilty plea to theft, probation for 2 years, 150 hours of community service, and reimbursement of all legal fees. Avoided jail but got a criminal record. Daisy wouldn't look me in the eye that day. She stood with her head down, repeating guilty in a quiet, lifeless voice. Ethan looked better, collected and almost calm, as if he were just going through an unpleasant but necessary procedure. After the verdict was announced, he tried to approach me, but Bennett stepped between us, and my son-in-law backed away. I haven't seen them since. I heard from Bennett that they had sold the house in Santa Barbara, paid off their debts, and moved to Oregon, where Ethan had a distant relative who promised to help with work. Daisy called twice, once a week after the trial, the second time on my birthday in November. Both times I didn't answer. What could I say to her? That I had forgiven her. That would be a lie. That I was still angry. That would be too obvious. Better silence than words that would only deepen the wound. My house on the hill looked the same as before. White walls, terracotta roof, spacious terrace overlooking the ocean. But inside, everything had changed. I took down all the security cameras. They were no longer needed. I removed the pictures of Daisy from the living room, leaving only the one in the study, the one of her as a child, without a shadow of the calculating look I'd seen in her eyes the last time I'd seen her. Trudy continued to come twice a week, but now worked less. There was almost no clutter in the one-person house. I told her we could cut the visits down to 1 a week, but she refused. "You need someone to come, Mr. Huxley," she said in her usual straightforward tone. "Otherwise, you'll get completely buried in your thoughts." She was right. After all that had happened, I became even more withdrawn. My morning walks along the beach became longer, but I went to Neil's cafe less and less often, avoiding prying eyes and the inevitable questions. Neighbors still said hello, but conversations became shorter and more superficial. Everyone knew the story about Daisy and Ethan. News travels fast in a small town. Some thought I was harsh but fair. Others thought I was a heartless old man who had ruined his own daughter's life. I didn't care what they thought. I'd always lived by my own rules, and I wasn't going to change now. Bennett visited me once a week. We discussed investments, changes in tax laws, sometimes played chess. He never mentioned Daisy first, but he listened attentively if I brought her up. That happened less and less often lately. On the December morning, I decided to sell the house. It was snowing lightly outside my window, a rare occurrence in Carpinteria. White flakes fell slowly onto the terrace, melting before they could accumulate. I looked at the fragile, short-lived snow and thought about my life here. 15 years in this house, every day overlooking the ocean. Every morning the same walks, the same faces. I picked up the phone and called Bennett. "I've decided to sell the house," I said without preamble when he answered. A second pause, then a calm voice. "Are you sure?" "Absolutely. There are too many memories here, good ones and bad ones. It's time to move on." "Where do you plan to move to?" "Haven't decided yet. Maybe Santa Fe or Sedona, somewhere in the desert, away from the ocean. A change of scenery would do me good." "Okay." There was no surprise in Bennett's voice, only acceptance. "I'll contact a realtor I trust. A house in this location won't be on the market for long." "Thank you." I was quiet for a moment, then added, "One more thing. I want you to let Daisy know about selling the house and about me moving." "Are you sure?" There was slight surprise in his voice now. "You don't want to call her yourself?" "No." I shook my head, though he couldn't see it. "Just give her the facts." No emotions, no excuses. After the conversation, I walked out onto the terrace, despite the cold. The snow had almost stopped, with only isolated snowflakes still swirling in the air. Below, at the foot of the hill, the ocean stretched out, gray, turbulent, eternal. For 15 years, I looked at it every day. For 15 years, it had been a silent witness to my life, my decisions, my mistakes. Will I miss him? Perhaps. But not for the memories that are now associated with this place. Not for the feeling that every corner of the house held echoes of betrayal. The realtor Bennett recommended was an energetic, middle-aged woman named Lorraine. She didn't ask too many questions, quickly appraised the house, and quoted an impressive amount, far more than I'd paid 15 years ago. Real estate in Carpinteria has gone up a lot in value, she explained, especially houses with this view. I can start showings as early as next week if you're ready. I was ready, the sooner the better. The first potential buyers arrived 3 days later. A young couple with 2 children, a boy about 8 years old and a girl about 6. They walked around the rooms, admiring the view, discussing which bedroom would be the nursery and which would be the guest bedroom. The children ran around the terrace, their laughter sounding strange and unfamiliar in my usually quiet house. I watched them from the study, where I had retreated so as not to interfere with the inspection. Something squeezed inside at the sight of this happy family. Could Alice and Daisy and I have been like that? Carefree, joyful, together? Or were we doomed from the beginning to discord, to misunderstanding, to mutual resentment? The couple didn't buy the house. The price was too high for them. But a week later, another buyer came in, and then another and another. Lorraine said there was a lot of interest in the house, and I could count on a quick sale at a good price. In mid-January, an offer came in, which I accepted. The buyer was a San Francisco businessman looking for a second home for weekends and vacations. He didn't haggle, agreed to the full price on the condition that the deal be finalized quickly. It was a good fit for me. While the paperwork was being prepared, I started looking for a new place to live. The internet allowed me to virtually travel to different cities, study the real estate market, compare prices and locations. I chose Santa Fe. I like the atmosphere of this city, its architecture, cultural life, and of course, the absence of the ocean, which reminded me too much of Carpinteria. Bennett informed Daisy of the sale of the house, as I had requested. According to him, she took the news calmly, only asking where I planned to move. When he said Santa Fe, she nodded and thanked me for the information. Didn't ask for a message, didn't express a desire to see me before I left. Maybe she too thought some bridges couldn't be rebuilt. In the final weeks before the move, I spent time sorting through my belongings. Over 15 years, the house had accumulated many items: books, documents, collectible watches, paintings, souvenirs from trips. Some I planned to take with me, some I planned to sell or give away, some I planned to get rid of for good. Trudy helped me with the packing. She didn't express regret at my departure, but I could see the sadness in her eyes. We'd worked together for years, gotten used to each other. I offered her a solid severance package, which she accepted with dignity, without too much gratitude. "Will you find a new housekeeper in Santa Fe?" she asked, carefully wrapping my collector's watch in paper. "Maybe," I shrugged, "but she won't be like you." Trudy smiled slightly, a rare display of emotion on her part. "Of course she won't. I'm one of a kind." That was the whole Trudy thing about her. Straightforward, confident, without sentimentality. While sorting through my things, I came across an old box of photos of Daisy, from infancy to college graduation. I sat on the floor of my office, poring over the pictures, and felt a wave of conflicting emotions rise up inside again. Pride in her first steps, in her high school accomplishments, in getting into a good college. Disappointment at her constant financial problems, at her inability to appreciate what she had, and pain. The sharp, piercing pain of a betrayal that seemed to undo everything good that had ever been between us. I set the box aside. Its contents would not go with me to Santa Fe. The past must stay in the past. A week before the house deal closed, Bennett took me to dinner at Carpinteria's finest restaurant. We sat at a window overlooking the ocean, drank good wine, and talked about the future. My plans for the new house, his ideas for managing my investments, news from the world of finance and politics. "You didn't ask about Daisy," he remarked as we were just finishing dessert. I shrugged. "Is there anything to ask about?" "She found a job in Portland. Something to do with office management, not in her specialty, but with growth prospects. Ethan works for his relative's construction company." I nodded, not showing much interest. "Good. They need to start somewhere." Bennett was quiet for a moment, then added, "She's pregnant. 4th month." This news caught me off guard. I froze with my glass in my hand, unable to bring it to my lips. "Pregnant?" "Yes." Bennett watched my reaction carefully. "Looks like you're going to be a grandfather this summer." Grandpa. It was a strange word. Foreign. I'd never envisioned myself in that role. Daisy and Ethan had talked several times about wanting children, but always added that now wasn't the right time, or we need to get on our feet first. And now, after everything that had happened, after losing their home, their jobs, their reputations, they had decided to have a baby. Did she ask me to tell you? I asked, finally taking a sip of wine. No, Bennett shook his head. I found out from a mutual acquaintance, but thought you should know. I nodded, not knowing what to say. Should I congratulate Daisy, send a gift for the baby-to-be, or continue the silence, maintaining the distance I'd set myself? Your trust fund for her children will come in handy, Bennett remarked, as if reading my mind, though they don't know about it yet. And they won't know until the child turns 18. I was firm in that decision. The money is for education, not for them. Bennett nodded without arguing. He knew I was adamant on some issues. The remaining days before I left passed in a hectic pace. Final preparations, packing, meetings with lawyers to sign documents. I felt no nostalgia or regret, only impatience, a desire to finish with the formalities and start a new life. On the eve of my departure, I walked around the empty house for the last time. The furniture had already been moved out, some to a new house in Santa Fe, some sold or given away. All that was left were the bare walls, the empty rooms, the echo of footsteps on the wooden floors. I stepped out onto the terrace and took a long look at the ocean, golden in the setting sun. So many memories are associated with that view. Morning coffees alone, the rare visits from Daisy and Ethan, their fake smiles and feigned concern, the last dinner before their attempted theft, and the months that followed, lonely, quiet, filled with wondering what had gone wrong. Perhaps I had been too hard on Daisy as a child. Perhaps I worked too hard and showed too little love. Perhaps money had always stood between us, as a measure of success for me and a source of trouble for her. But did that justify betrayal? Did that give her the right to steal from me? To plan to disappear with my money? To discuss my possible imminent death as a convenient factor in their plans? Number. I could admit my mistakes as a father, but I couldn't and wouldn't justify what she had done. That was the bitter truth of our situation. We were both wrong. We were both responsible for the destruction of the relationship. But neither of us wanted to take the first step toward reconciliation. Maybe someday, when the pain has dulled, when anger has given way to fatigue, we can talk again. Maybe having a baby will change things. Or maybe some rifts just can't be healed, and the best we can do is move on, taking the lessons of the past with us. I went back into the house, closed the patio door, and checked one last time to make sure everything was off. Everything was locked. Tomorrow I will hand the keys over to the new owner and leave Carpinteria for good. A new chapter of my life will begin in Santa Fe. Without the ocean, without the daily reminders of betrayal, without the shadow of the past hanging over every day. In the morning, I met with the buyer and his attorney at Bennett's office. We signed all the necessary paperwork, shook hands. The deal was finalized. The house that had been my fortress for 15 years now belonged to another man. You won't regret buying it, I told the new owner. It's a beautiful house. Just be careful who you let in. He nodded, not understanding the hidden meaning of my words. To him, it was just safety advice, nothing more. Bennett and I walked outside. My luggage was already loaded into the car that was to take me to the Santa Barbara airport. Are you sure you don't want me to pass something on to Daisy? Bennett asked, shaking my hand in farewell. One last chance before you leave. I wondered, was there something I wanted to say to my daughter? Some words of forgiveness, reconciliation, hope for the future, or a warning, a rebuke, a final breakup? No, I finally answered. Nothing. Let her live her life. I'll live mine. Bennett nodded, understanding. You'll keep me posted on how you get settled in your new place? Of course, I smiled weakly. You're my trusted manager and my only friend. We hugged, a rare gesture for both of us, usually reserved in our displays of emotion. Then I got into the car and took one last look at Carpinteria, the small coastal town that had been my home for so long. When the car touched down, I didn't look back. I looked only ahead, at the road leading to the airport, to the plane that would take me to a new life. A life without Daisy, without the constant reminders of betrayal, without the weight of the past. Money shows the true nature of people, a truth I've learned over many years in business. It tears off masks, exposes ulterior motives, reveals real priorities. Sometimes it brings disappointment, as in the case of Daisy and Ethan. Sometimes it brings pleasant surprises, as with Trudy, who has remained loyal and honest despite access to my home and belongings. But ultimately, I prefer the bitter truth to sweet lies. It's better to know who really surrounds you, even if that knowledge will bring pain. Better to see people as they are, not as you want them to be. With that thought, I was leaving Carpinteria, the city where I had lived for 15 years, the city where my daughter had betrayed me, the city where I realized that some bonds could not be repaired no matter how hard we tried. There was a new life ahead, a new home, new opportunities, and perhaps in time, a new understanding of the past, without bitterness, without anger, only with acceptance of what was and hope for what will be.